Johnson. My name is Kate Johnson. I'm one of the co-directors here at Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and I just really want to thank you for showing up for this important conversation. I'm deeply honored to have our guests, Carinne Luck and Jonathan Brenneman, with us today. So much gratitude for you joining us. And our overall intention today is to really just explore how our Buddhist practice can serve us as we mobilize towards a free Palestine. It's a huge question, a huge series of questions, and we don't expect that we'll have all the answers by the end of this time together, but just grateful to be able to be in the questions together, and hope that this is one of a series of conversations we can have here and in all of our Buddhist sanghas. So as we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm on, which is the land of the Lenape-Hoking people. If you'd like, you can join me in taking a moment to just drop your attention down into the land that you're on, the spot on the earth that is supporting you at this moment, and to acknowledge the presence of the Indigenous people who have always been here and are here and will always be here, and to tap into your sense of solidarity with the liberation struggles of Indigenous people everywhere. Also want to acknowledge the Asian Buddhist ancestors of the lineages in which I practice, Theravada Buddhism. And if you'd like to, you can join me in taking a moment to connect with the Asian ancestors of the Buddhist lineages in which you practice. Maybe connecting with the wish that our practice today does them proud. And finally, just an invitation to connect with and acknowledge the presence of your own spiritual ancestors, blood ancestors. May our practice together today bring them light. May they support us in our practice. And before we get into our conversation, I'm going to hand the mic over to my amazing co-director, Sarvang, for a little bit of Zoom orientation and then some meditation.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. My name is Sarvang Parikh. I go by he and they pronouns here on Ohlone land. And just to note that you will not be able to chat with anyone except for the host, which includes myself, Kate, and a board member, Nicole Wire. So we're doing that just to help preserve the space and also just to allow folks to keep our attention on listening. And there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and you can present those questions at that time to Kate. You'll also notice that the function of captions is enabled. And if you'd like to use that feature on the bottom of your screen, of your tools there, you'll be able to see captions and enable captions. And we'll do our best to speak in a way that allows those that are enabling those services to be able to have that access there. We apologize that we were not able to have secure an ASL interpreter for this event, and we'll attempt to do that for as many of our functions as we can. We have a deep devotion to accessibility. And so if you have any tech issues that are coming up for you, please go ahead and chat Nicole Wire or myself, unless when I'm about to lead this meditation, I won't probably be responsive to the text. And thank you again. And so with that, we'll just take some moments together to orient in our practice. And so many of you might be already familiar and have a practice, so just let that be a guide for you, and whatever words that support you in this, may they be there. And if you'd like to just allow this to be in the background, you're welcome to mute me. And we'll have about 7 minutes or so of practice time. And just as you come in, just to welcome that our body's here. as we take refuge here into connection with the land that you're on, as Kate invited us to really connect with in our own ancestral lineages, known or unknown. And maybe take a moment if you'd like to just orient to the space around you. If you're in a place that you can visually take in the sights, you're welcome to be seated, lying, moving, eyes open or closed. And if you're taking in the sights, just allow yourself to anchor yourself with anything in the space that particularly might feel pleasant to look at or grounding to you, whatever that means. And as you come back in, just checking in if there's any movements of the body that would support you. Might wiggle, kind of get yourself to shake up a little bit. See if your neck or shoulders need some space. You're welcome to have your eyes softened or closed. And just inviting in, if it's accessible, just a collective breath. Letting ourselves breathe in together as a chorus. And sighing out if that's available. Feeling that release and settling. You're welcome to use the breath as an anchor that supports you. You're just tuning in to any sensations in the body. What support can you feel? Perhaps feeling the earth lifting you up. Maybe support underneath the feet or the back. Just allowing ourselves to rest as we're able to arrive together. Sensing into all that we're carrying in this collective moment in our personal lives. Welcoming all and any feelings, the complexity of feelings that we're carrying in with our time. Maybe you have words for those feelings. Maybe they just have an impression, a sensation, a texture, an image. How can you welcome them today? Perhaps a hand at the heart or cheek, somewhere in connection to your body might be a welcomed place. You're invited to do so if that supports you. Perhaps you can call on the support of a friend or loved one that you've recently turned to, gotten a hug, or shared some tears, or some words of encouragement, or some moments of joy. Just calling in your resource, all the resources that might allow you to be here today, knowing it's an extremely precious opportunity to be here today. An urgently precious an opportunity to gather in community. Welcoming in the confusion, the questions, the angst, the grief, the rage. The determination, the resolve, the commitment, the care. In a moment, you'll hear the sound of the bell. Just allowing that to guide you in. You can hear a slight sound of a bell because I cannot turn off my little audio function here. So we'll try to do our best. Technical difficulties, folks. That's a ding over there. Welcoming you back gently from wherever you are. If your eyes have been closed, just allow yourselves to reconnect with the senses that you have available, the sounds around you, the sights around you. And I'll pass it back to you, Kate.
Thank you, Sarwang. Thanks for the comic relief and for the beautiful meditation beforehand. So before we get into our practice of discussion, I want to share a couple of agreements that we're asking each of us in the space to uphold. The first is to take care of your body, mind, and heart. To be aware that this is a pro-Palestinian liberation, pro-Muslim, pro-Jewish, anti-apartheid, pro-ceasefire and humanitarian aid space. And if this doesn't feel like the space that's for you today, that's okay. It will be recorded, so you could always watch it later. But just take care of yourself. If at any point you feel like the space isn't supportive for you, we want you to be in a space that feels supportive. And maybe there's another way to connect with us or with your practice at another time. The second is to help us cultivate the energy in the space. So an invitation, if possible, to close out other windows, other kind of text conversations, and to do something that is very rare for any of us to do these days, is to pay attention to one thing at a time. Be a friend to your own mind and heart in that way. Certainly, we're all getting pulled in a billion directions. So if it's not possible for you to do, that's okay, but it's an invitation. And the third agreement is to remember bodhicitta. Excuse me. which is we see it as an invitation to uphold the inherent dignity of all beings, even as we hold individuals and institutions accountable for their actions. So that's it. And if you're staying on, that is your sign that you're agreeing to these agreements. So thank you for your participation in our community space. I'm going to introduce Carinne and Jonathan now. And also a reminder to myself, as well as to our guests and anyone speaking, that because we have closed captions enabled, we're all going to try to speak slowly and clearly. Note to self. Jonathan Brenneman is a Palestinian-American Christian and graduate of the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies. He has worked in multiple countries doing Palestine advocacy, human rights monitoring, grassroots organizing, and challenging anti-Arab racism. Jonathan's work connects the Palestinian decolonial struggle with those of other indigenous peoples and challenges theologies of domination. Thank you for being here, Jonathan. Our other guest is Carinne Luck, who is an organizer, trainer, and strategist who goes where she can be of most service. Since 2019, Carinne has been supporting progressive Jewish and non-Jewish leaders around the world to stop the instrumentalization of anti-Semitism, leading her to co-found Diaspora Alliance, where she now serves as the international director. Other groups Carinne has worked with include Frontline Election Defenders, Mi Gente, Hand in Hand, If Not Now, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, Southerners on New Ground, and Citizen Well. Thank you both for being here so much. As we settle into the conversation, I just wanted to start by checking in, asking each of you how you're doing in this moment. As I share, we have so much gratitude for you being here, and know that this is not a topic that's far from you, where you're outside looking in, but one in which you are involved, your people are involved, and want to make sure we take care of you. So is there anything that you need from us in this space? Anything you want from us as listeners? How are you doing, and how can we support you? And I'll talk at once now. Oh, you can't unmute yourself? Darn it.
Okay. Hi. Good to be with you all tonight. Yeah. Coming a little more frazzled than I usually do to these, because I spent the whole day organizing, keeping up with signal threads, figuring out logistics for marches, holding coalitions together that have differences. And everything is also still very raw right now, as news continues to slowly trickle out of Gaza, and thinking of the people there. That's where I come. I'm going to be a little less polished than usual, and appreciate in advance how you all are holding the space.
I'm really glad to get to be here with you all, and with you, Jonathan, and you, Kate, and Sarvang, and the community. I see some familiar names and faces. I realized during the meditation I'm so tired. That was my overwhelming feeling. So I'm also, in addition to all my other backgrounds, English. So now I have two T's, like, to just be super duper English. This is like my Middle Eastern tea. This is my English tea. I've shared with the co-presenters today that I'm coming into this actually after a few months dealing with a very sort of close family medical crisis, ongoing crisis. And so also a little, not sure if I'm ever polished, but less, maybe less webinar ready. But but also really mindful that all of us had like this holding of this sort of micro and macro. I was dealing with it in hospital on the morning of October 7th as my relatives who are still in Israel were texting me and dealing with them, you know, so you just kind of, and that we're all dealing with that too, right? These things that are sort of close and far. And so that's sort of, I'm really, holding the sort of micro macro of it all, which feels very Buddhist. And sort of to that effect, I guess a couple of things that I feel, especially when I'm speaking in sort of US-based spaces, is one, a reminder that we are here, right, on our own occupied land with all those complexities, and also with those enormous privileges of being in the United States at this time in this moment. And that actually allows us to separate ourselves from the sort of like distress and despair of people going through it. And so, I don't know, I have found in spaces in the last few weeks that sometimes that's just needing that separation is like useful to remember that we are here and we're not there, and that can be useful. That gives us a great advantage. And then at the same time, that what is true in the US is not necessarily true of elsewhere either. And so US racial constructs, US interpretations of language and colonialism and empire, like that is very US. But as a person that doesn't just organize in the Middle East, but also in Europe and with some folks in Latin America, you know, just reminded always how US, even on the left, I know can sometimes we can accept, you sort of put our interpretation on the rest of the world too. And I have a link that maybe I'll share later about an article about why do we all use American political technology for our internationalist struggles. And so also being open to that what we're used to might not apply here. So yeah, that's kind of a couple of things I'm thinking about and asking for.
Thank you. Yeah, let's all try. And what you just said, Carinne, brought me to one of my first questions, or leads into one of my first questions. I was thinking of a teacher of mine, Dr. Gay Teresa Johnson, who said, just in the context of a lecture once, that for some of us, our activism is born from our intersections. And I was wondering if each of you might share a little bit about your activism and where it comes from. And along with that, are there any intersections you want to name of who you are and, you know, where you come from that feel important to locate yourself inside of this conversation? I'm seeing a note that Jonathan and Carinne can't unmute themselves again, so we may need some help.
Yeah, so coming to this work, kind of the intersections to name for me, I want to say, like, coming to it as a Palestinian Christian, particularly to a religious space or spiritual spaces, there is a unique intersection there as a Christian who recognizes that this tradition has been used for supremacy and for domination over others, and particularly other religions, and to come at it as a Palestinian whose people and person, myself, has been deeply harmed by Christian, especially Christian and Jewish supremacy as well. And so those are two of the intersections, and then finally being part of the Mennonite tradition within the Christian tradition that has been historically a more peace-minded and less, but not totally supremacist form of Christianity, has, I think, led me to finding common cause with liberative forms of other religions and spiritualities as well. So that's a lot of what brings me to this work in this particular way.
Like, I just want you to keep talking. I feel so cozy. I'm like, this is great. Jonathan, let's hang out after this. So I am I did the Block Build B Fellowship program thing at BPF many years ago, and I introduced myself as like I'm Israeli and British, also kind of American, like triple colonial threat. So that's one version of me, right? My like passports, right? The sort of where I've been granted citizenship and where I've been born into. And then that whole other part is that a lot of my life I've been sort of or living in these intersections of sort of passing, which is that like I was sort of I suppose I'm most kind of owning class or what have you when I'm in Israel, right? Most in that top of the rung social positioning, including being secular, and so like all that brings and then but moving a lot and being an immigrant in different settings, and in the UK being very like foreign. Being Jewish is to be foreign, and being poor is a whole, and then coming to the US without papers in the mid-90s, but also being able to pass and kind of get away with being here without papers and finding my way into sort of quote unquote the American dream. So I think for me a lot of the intersections come from being like always sort of an other, but also always being able to kind of pass, and sometimes you get to hear things and people say what they really mean, but also you get to experience things that people in what is presumed to be your social class don't get to experience. So I think being in those spaces, and again, as we go into this conversation, right, thinking about how Buddhism is so useful, because, right, not having a sort of judgmental comparative mind, like how that can actually allow us to meet each other without kind of bringing all those assumptions when we look at each other.
Thank you. I agree. I'm like, oh, I would love to just spend more time like getting to know each other. And I want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for this event, which really came out of meeting the current moment, of course, and also something that happened several months ago, which is that the Buddhist Peace Fellowship quietly signed the Apartheid-Free Communities Pledge, which is a pledge that came out of the American Friends Service Committee. And in that act, BPF joined, I think, almost 170 faith-based organizations who have come together to vow to work together to end all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. And of course, it wasn't, so that the choice to sign wasn't coming out of the events after October 7th, but really from a recognition that the events leading up to October 7th were already violent and unsustainable. And Jonathan, you were a big part of helping us make this choice to sign the pledge, which we really felt was aligned with our Buddhist values around certainly non-harming, and also our commitment to, as an organization, to anti-racism and to decolonization. And so, Jonathan, I thought maybe you could start, since I know that there are folks gathered here who are teachers and who are leaders of spiritual communities, Buddhist and otherwise. If you could share a little bit about, the pledge and how it came to be. Yeah.
So to answer that question quite literally, there was a group that AFSC pulled together of particularly Christian-based activists that had been doing a lot of work to get denominations to divest from the Israeli occupation. And churches are one of the main spaces in the US that is leading on divestment, at least church denominations. And so they wanted to get together with these groups and say kind of what's missing and what should we be doing next. And they kind of came up with like 3 areas that felt like there was work to be done in. One was that they recognized that they had gotten these major wins at the top levels of denominations, but it wasn't creating much for individual congregations or communities to do out of that. And so we wanted something that individual religious communities could do. The second thing was that there weren't very many, I'll just use the term interfaith, which is a imperfect term, but it's what I have for today. There weren't really many interfaith initiatives that were really holding together. We would kind of, Christian groups would kind of go to JVP and maybe American Muslims for Palestine, and there were these different groups, but there was nothing that really felt like people were doing this together across religious, faith, and spiritual lines. And so wanting to create something that would speak to multiple traditions. And then finally, a lot of the work that when denominations passed their resolutions, like I said, they were divesting from Israeli occupation, which was very specifically about what was going on in the West Bank and Gaza. And there's now an international recognition that Israel is an apartheid state from the river to the sea, that the government of Israel has control over the West Bank, Gaza, and the area in between, or 48 Israel, and that Palestinians living in any of those areas are treated as second or potentially third-class citizens. And so wanting to help raise awareness of this recognition of all of Israel as an apartheid state. So we created a pledge that individual communities and congregations could take to say, we do not want to participate in any aspect of Israeli apartheid, in any of the discrimination against Palestinians. And we wanted to and offered that to various religious communities and spiritual communities. And there's now kind of a group of Christians within the apartheid-free community. There's a group of Muslims that has kind of their own structure, a group of Jews that has their own structure. BPF is the first Buddhist group to sign on, was an early adopter of was one of the early signatures of the pledges. And we would love to see more Sanghas and more Buddhist communities sign the pledge and get connected with this network of religious and spiritual communities that are working for equal rights in Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, thank you so much. I felt this longing come up when you were talking about the way that, some churches had become really leaders in calling for divestment and feeling a real, sadness around the silence that I've seen in among Buddhist communities around this issue of apartheid and oppression in Palestine. I saw some great a beautiful statement come out of Damadena. I saw a statement come out from the Arise Sangha within the Plum Village lineage, but not much else. And so, yeah, I'm wondering just how each of you, I know, Carinne, you move in Buddhist spaces a lot. Maybe you could speak to this, the role of faith-based groups, and particularly Buddhist groups, and even interfaith coalitions in the Palestinian liberation, or what it potentially could be. How
yeah. I mean, more just in the strategy hub for a bit. I mean, there is not a better time to join this kind of effort, precisely because and we'll get more into this, I think, but because there has been such a conflation and an active strategy, and I can talk more about this, and this is quite documented and not hidden, a strategy of deeming campaigns like that, this campaign, and going back to divestment, BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, this whole body of nonviolent organizing, to deem it as anti-Semitic and to sort of smear it, that that some folks have resisted more, and yet here we are in this moment of great violence, and we actually do have where people are like, where are the, right? This is a very common refrain if you've heard, where are the Palestinian Gandhis? Where are the, we'll set aside our things about Gandhi, where are, right? And the thing is that, I mean, some are in Israeli jails. There's many answers to these questions, but some of it is they're actually in your community, and they're in your faith and spiritual based spaces, and we haven't allowed them to thrive, right? And we've actually either, we'll talk about it more, but through concern, genuine concern. I appreciate the concern people have for not being anti-Semitic, but because of that concern or something less generous, those nonviolent campaigns haven't been able to thrive. Well, here we have this moment. So I just really want to like big up this opportunity. It's both like a genuine opportunity and a little bit of a trolling one. Not that we, Buddhist troll, but to be like, all right, well, here is this thing that you have not allowed us to do, right? So here is this campaign, so let's do it. So strategically, it is an amazing time and so wonderful to have this offering that so many have already thought about that we can actually bring our people to. So that, I think the other thing, there's like a couple of other things. One, I feel it's so ironic or sad that Buddhist communities haven't really been stepping up into this moment, or frankly previously, because to me, all my organizing is so grounded in my Buddhist practice, right? Like I can't actually do this work or other work that I do without my Buddhist practice. I'm sort of I've been leaning really heavily. I sometimes sit with Upaya Zen Center and have been on faculty there, and they are born out of the lineage, like Bernie Glassman is one of their sort of teachers of Roshi Joan Halifax, in that more, the recent lineage. And Bernie Glassman with others founded the Zen Peacemakers lineage, and they have the 3 tenets, right, of not knowing, bearing witness, and then from there, wise and compassionate action. And so for me, how come, like, it's all there for us, and so I really, I've been sitting with like, how can we actually help people in the not knowing, the bearing witness, right? Before we tweet and tell everyone our opinion and write something on Instagram and put our thing on, like actually our practice can create much more fertile and fruitful ground for the organizing, right? For the work. So to me, that's like right there. The spiritual practice is how we withstand the crisis, right? We discern what is needed. And so I really, I feel like this is Buddhist, this is our time. Because so much of that is needed, right? Like all the aspects of the Eightfold Path, so much of that is needed. So one, I think that I don't know how we are getting through the crises, multiple crises of this time and the time to come without our spiritual practice. That's just like one thing. On a more practical level, I guess I would say, or sort of, strategic, that I do think about also that sites of spiritual practice and faith, mosques, synagogues, sanghas, Sikh, temples, etc., Hindu temples, that these are also sites where great solidarity can be forged without actually needing to sign on to the petition or the campaign. And I know this happens in many places. My experience here in New York is how so often it is communities of faith and spirit that join together to offer mutual aid and non-police-based security to each other, because actually we also have the practices and the rituals. So I have been in spaces where, and I will say, where we do not all politically agree on this issue and others, but where people of faith, people of spiritual practice have held a safe space for others to participate in ritual and practice. And as the incidence of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, as violence ratchets up, and these sites becomes, sites of possible violence, and also folks who people happen to think are one of those faiths or others, we have an amazing opportunity to extend solidarity. And as we know, right, trust is built in action, not in like theory or in abstractions, and certainly not in tweets. So do the action, and actually a lot can build from there. Those are a couple of thoughts.
Thank you. I love these ideas, and both in terms of making these outward statements to the world about what we believe in and what we believe we have a moral and ethical commitment to denounce, and then also like, how do we protect the people who are right here in our communities, and for those of us who are in sanghas that are currently organized. I love that idea of, going to mosques, going to synagogues, creating space where, people can actually do their practice. Yeah. I want to bring in something that I feel like folks wrestle with. I wrestle with certainly within these kind of spiritual and political spaces around the practice of nonviolent resistance and kind of alignment with principled nonviolence. I know that this is a commitment for both of you. It's certainly a commitment for Buddhist Peace Fellowship towards principled nonviolence, and certainly we're in the middle of a crisis where there has been extreme terrorist violence carried out by the military and civilians of Israel and of Palestine. And I think it's, I've seen and heard kind of folks throw up their hands and say like, everyone's wrong, just stop the violence, like, let's all be peaceful. And that's most of what I've heard in terms of statements coming from, Buddhist leaders who I really love and trust, that's more like, can there be peace in the world? And that's not exactly what I hear the two of you saying. And so I just would love for you to say more about how you hold your commitment to nonviolence, situating yourself within the realities of the current conflict, and a commitment to ending Israeli apartheid. How all of those things work together for you in your being and in your practice.
Guess I'll go first.
Okay, either whatever you prefer. I just spoke.
Yeah, I think for me, part of it is coming at it as a Palestinian Christian and recognizing that like Palestine is just about the only place in the world where Christianity was practiced like writ large, non-violently, and like really being proud of that part of both my Palestinian and Christian identities, and holding to that very strongly. And also there's, as someone who has studied peace studies and looked at how do you challenge colonialism? How do you challenge repressive regimes? And nonviolent direct action, campaigns of nonviolent direct action tend to be some of the most strategic and most successful, particularly in building the kind of society that we want to see, right? Because I don't want Palestine to get free by becoming an oppressive regime. I think Israel is a great example of the fact that an oppressive regime is not the answer to oppression. I want Palestine to get free with justice and equality at its very center of that. And nonviolent means actually demand like a more democratic understanding of how we fight. for liberation. And so it's about that. The means that we use will create the end. And so that's why now, even now, I still hold that commitment very, very tightly. And it is hard, not only when seeing the things happening in Palestine, but when calls for nonviolence tend to sound like calls for non-resistance. And helping other Palestinians recognize that as well. Palestinians have been doing nonviolent resistance in so many creative ways for so long, and it still gets called violent by those in power, which makes it even harder to hold on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just really resonate, agree, and particularly think that for those of us that aren't there, that have lots of choices that we can make, those of us who wish to see nonviolent resistance and then need to invest in it. And so partly that really goes to me to that means taking risks when maybe it's not popular to support forms of nonviolent resistance that feel uncomfortable, talking about apartheid, talking about boycott, divestment, sanctions, right? It requires a lot of risk taking and investing from outside. I was reading, I've been turning a lot to War Resisters International. This is something I read when I was first coming up as a baby organizer after 9/11. So it's literally from 1990, Nonviolence and Armed Struggle. It's sort of the statement on the War Resisters International website, still there. And there's so much in here about the need to invest, right? We speak so much about what people shouldn't do and how we want them to be organizing, and especially in moments of crisis, we think that's the moment to also tell everyone how they should have been doing things and what is the right strategy. And yet actually we don't really invest in this in non-crisis moments. And we also don't invest with our own sort of risk-taking, which is so nominal compared to the risks of those thousands of Palestinians who did non-violently march, right, just a few years ago, and were met with incredible violence. And how many of us know about that, right? How many of us know exactly what happened there? How many of us can name the nonviolent resistors? Why aren't these our heroes? We actually have them, right? So I think that, and that inspires hope, and that inspires hope for me, Palestinians, Israelis, and people around the world, right, who are just doing that work. It's not glamorous, who meet each other, and who do that work at great threat to themselves. You know, right now the Israeli government has said that their own police can shoot protesters if they're blocking intersections. They're talking about Jewish Israelis, the Israeli government, that is a law, right? So, and then there were folks out in Israel, right? So there are people, the humanity, right? Looking at that humanity and looking at that resistance everywhere, and the domination of militarism that always seeks to, defeat and terrorize. We have to invest in all those folks. And I can tell you that a lot of these groups, I know it's like a third rail often to fundraise and give resources to Palestinian groups. We have to stop letting that be. We have to talk to our friends who are funders and donors and ourselves, and we have to resource the nonviolent movements. We have to take the risks. We're so privileged to be here. We can do so much risk taking. Let's do it,
You for that encouragement. And I feel like, there's so much in our practice that can help us be brave and step into risk, and to recognize that, like, speaking up is an act of nonviolent resistance for those of us who can do so.
And I just to one thought, sorry, on that, is that, you know, it's very interesting who tends to actually, you know, invitation to Buddhist sanghas everywhere, which is, I actually don't see that many Buddhist sanghas go to the West Bank or the South Hebron Hills and do the nonviolence trainings. And I know some folks have, but there's actually, you know, Palestinian groups, Jewish groups, there's so many groups actually that are out there and have been for like decades, and newer iterations of them where they're out there. So there's also, like, let's go, you know, we can actually be there too. I think the Bernie Glassman, there was a lot of the bearing witnesses sometimes where bad things have happened. And we don't always have to just go to like where the bad things happen. We can go to where we can actually bear witness with courage now and with our practice. So I'm sure Jonathan knows lots of those groups, others I do, of course, so we can like share those resources.
Yeah, please do. I'm feeling a delegation coming on. I want to ask you one last question and then take a somatic break, and then we have hopefully some questions from folks who've come here who they'd like to submit. I was my bathtub reading has been Let This Radicalize You. Miriam Kaba and Kelly Hayes' book. It's like what helps me go to sleep at night these days. And in the introduction, Maya Shenwar shares that the title of this book, the book, Let This Radicalize You, comes from words that Miriam Kaba often repeats in times of deep crisis, which are these, she says, let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair. And I'm curious, just before we, you know, shift gears a little bit, anything you might be willing to share that you learn in the course of your political work and your spiritual work about alchemizing despair, about the continuous process of radicalization and turning despair into, I was going to say turning despair into fuel for change. I don't know that it's always that that neat, but I guess the question is around that. How are you working with the like inevitable despair that you're experiencing at this time? Oh, you can't unmute yourself? This is like, we need this tech glitch.
I have to go, but I just
yeah, how
and
are you
should we
working?
flip the script? Should I go and then you go? Like otherwise I think I'll just say there's two, for me, I am really struck by how, like, where, okay, feminism, feminists, women, feminism. And that's, for me, learning from women. I've, you know, been really blessed to be in the presence of like Kurdish women organizers and fighters, you know, revolutionaries, some of the Chilean feminists that really created the grounds for so much of the political work that's happened in Chile. And one of the practices they've taught me, and that that is like a physical enactment of the transformation, is like weaving. And anytime I've been in the presence of actually either of these groups, although it's different, there's always like needle and thread. So I was at a Women International Conference after a series of chemical attacks against Kurdish people had been, I mean, it's happening all the time, right? We don't hear about it. But there were 3 women in particular who had died from this particular revolutionary movement. And so we just passed needle and thread. The conference kept going. Kurdish women had flown into Berlin and we were weaving their names and just passed it around and passed it around. And Chilean women also talked about how they would paint on and sew the faces and the names of women who had been murdered by femicide, or who were environmentalists and murdered, as part of alliances in their country. And so what I learned from them is how much actually it's actually something that this Chilean feminist Laura said to me. It was like, she was very confused about like healing justice in America. I did a thing for Faith Matters with her, and she was like, but the organizing is the healing. The organizing is the healing. We sew, we paint, we're quiet, we hold, we honor. And I think how loud sometimes we are. And so for me, it's when I see that, and the literal alchemizing, the literal thread into image. Yeah, it just, it's actually like it creates hope and perspective and beauty, and it's really good for the nervous system too, I think.
Thanks for that question. Thanks for that answer. It's definitely better than the one that's in my mind. Yeah, because it's a constant balancing, right? Like I feel like I'm on the edge of despair so much, especially in these times. I find actually taking the time to mourn is helpful. I do see that quote that Sarang put, don't mourn, organize. I feel like you need to do both. At least I need to do both. And definitely spiritual practices help with that, and being connected with spiritual communities like Buddhist Peace Fellowship that don't try to spiritually bypass what is harmful in the world, and also don't but also keep me from just like dwelling in the negative. And then also just having the privilege of being a Palestinian and being in Palestine. And when I'm there, even despite how clear and how much pressure there is from Israeli apartheid, I also feel further from that despair, because I see how much life we Palestinians have, and how much love for life we have, and that is always something that helps keep me going.
Oh, so much. We're gonna pause and shift gears for a moment, and do two things. One is that we'll open up the chat so that anyone here who has questions for our guests can write them in directly to the host. I'll receive them and offer them to our guests. And the second is that amazing artist, energy worker, yoga instructor from San Francisco, Monica Magtoto, is going to offer a 5-minute somatic practice break for us. So Monica, thank you so much for coming. And folks who have questions, this is your time to formulate them.
Hey, hope you all can hear me okay. Thank you for having me. When Kate asked me to join today, I was just like, yes, of course. Yes, absolutely. 100%. So take a seat, or you can sit on the floor, or maybe even lie down for a moment. If you're in a chair, see if you can bring both feet to the floor evenly, and just kind of notice your feet on the floor and wherever you're making contact with your seat. And then go ahead and exhale everything out of the body. Take a deep inhale, fill up. And then open your mouth, let it go. One more time, fill up. Let it go. Maybe you shake the hands out a little bit. You can shake your head, you can shake it up high, you can shake it out to the sides, you can shake it down low. I like the Muppet hands. Gives a good, and then big inhale. Exhale, bring it center. You can bring one hand to your heart, one hand to your belly. Maybe you feel the breath there or the heartbeat. Maybe you give a little sway side to side. And just kind of imagine that you're a tree in the wind or a piece of seaweed in the sea. Just let everything kind of roll by you. Notice the spine, notice the vertebrae in the spine. And then maybe you give yourself a little, you can start at the arms. And gentle squeeze. See if you can ramp it up and then ramp it down. So if you're increasing the squeeze, 1, 2, 3, go ahead and decrease 3, 2, 1. You can do down your entire arm or even on your legs. My favorite one is the face. So gentle. If you're wearing glasses, it might be helpful to take them off. Just like a gentle squeeze, or you can do front and back. If it's okay, maybe the sides of the neck gently, or the shoulders. Keep breathing, maybe a little press on the chest, or you can kind of like gently rake the fingers across the chest. Just different options here, whatever feels on the arms. Brushing. I like the face one a lot. It's my favorite. And then just kind of heat up the hands, get a little energy going, a little warmth. And then give it a little clap. And then just bring that to your heart. Breathing into your hands. Feeling that warmth in the heart. Feeling that light in the heart. Just take a few full body inhales, full body exhales. Maybe it can be an audible exhale. Maybe there's a hum in there somewhere. And then just kind of blink the eyes a little, coming back. And see how you feel. Yeah, yawns happen, stretches happen. I hope that's helpful, and feel free to use these anytime. I really like the gentle squeezing. I really like still touch to make sure we're staying in our bodies during tough conversations. So yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Monica. That was so, I knew it was a good idea and it was correct. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a couple of questions coming in. I'll direct to Carinne and Jonathan. The first is, I think folks can see in the chat, it's as, I guess I wonder, as a white, non-Jewish US person, I guess I wonder if I, as a white, non-Jewish US person, have the right to tell Palestinians how to get free. Is it appropriate for me to counsel nonviolence in the face of overwhelming Israeli violence, or is that not approximately equivalent to advocating suicide?
My answer to that is no. You don't tell Palestinians how to resist. I will say you should join our resistance, and if you want to do that nonviolently, that would be great. There are plenty of campaigns here in the US, because if you are a taxpayer in the United States, you are giving at least $25 a year to the Israeli military. that is at this moment committing acts of genocide against Palestinians. And so most of us on this call are complicit, myself included, in what's happening right now. So we do, I feel, have a responsibility to take action, especially now.
I feel like it's a bit of a, oh, sorry.
I want to hear what you have to say, but I also just want to thank you, Jonathan, because I feel like it has been a challenge for, those of us who are really committed to nonviolence to know, like, I've seen us struggle, like how to interact in relationship to Palestinian resistance. And I think that, the answer you gave is like, yes, we can engage nonviolently and also like understand that it's not for us to determine how people find their freedom. Okay, Carinne, go ahead.
No, I think, I just think it's a bit of it's like a trap that's set or something, that you have to like know everything, or that you have to like have an opinion on all parts. But actually, like, especially as like moral, people of spirit and faith who or religion, it's just there are things you can just know, right? And you can know what is right and you can know what is wrong. And I also want to just I am not telling Palestinians at all how to react to Hamas. I just want to be clear that Hamas are the people that on October 7th, took responsibility for something, and not Palestinians. So also I just, and again, I'm not dictating, but I also, even just as we name things, that we just are careful with how we name. But yeah, let's just not fall into the trap of inaction. We don't have to tell anyone what to think at all. It's a lie of social media. But what we can do is bring our bodies and our best selves and bear witness and our questions and follow those who have been thinking about it and who are most impacted. Bring our bodies to bear.
Thank you for that. And aware that you just like said, we don't actually have to tell anyone else what to do. There are a couple questions about being in with others, because I think that this is an issue that has, divided sanghas, divided families. I'll read two of them that seem related. One is this: how do you bring your practice to close loved ones who are rooted in Zionism via intergenerational trauma? And the second, in a more general way, what are some beginning ways to start conversations with others who are not familiar with the concept of apartheid related to Israel's relationship to Palestine? So yeah, one kind of like just starting questions, and two, like for folks who are rooted in Zionism.
So what I do when I say we don't have to tell people, we could encourage and invite. We can tell governments what to do, for example, right? We can hope that we can tell governments, right? But yeah, we don't tell people in struggle how to struggle. That's just not the best use of our time. On the Zionism question, people attached to Zionism through intergenerational trauma. There's so many ways to think about that question, and this is, I don't know your people, and I do believe in intergenerational trauma. There's also a lot of people who went through those traumas who are not Zionist, or ideology is actually not, those things aren't a given. And so I also I'm always, again, this is not a judgment on anyone in particular, but I'm aware that sometimes we use trauma as a way to, I'm hearing from people these days, using trauma as a way to sort of help explain a politics that we might ourselves be uncomfortable with. And I think that this is the opportunity for inviting people into discernment. Not everyone has to be ready to get in the streets, but an invitation into discernment, an invitation to what is arising for people, an invitation to interrogate what is really happening. I think that's something that, especially when we're in relationship with people, and they trust us, we get to do that. And I think sometimes we start at the end So I helped start a group called If Not Now. If Not Now comes from the 3 Hillel questions. We started in 2014 in that war against Gaza and Lebanon. The first question of those 3 Hillel questions, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? The second, if I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? We often start with the if not now, when? Go, action. But that's not what we have to invite everyone into all the time, right? Block, build, be. There are different parts for different moments and for different people. And so situating people and helping them do that, I think, is one of the most generous actions that we can do. And gentle, loving questions. Is this really trauma? My family is, many family is still there. We've, if you're Jewish, you've probably lost people, or you have people who are refugees. And it's not because as an American Jew, I don't do that because I'm Jewish or not Jewish, right? But just the trauma is, sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a bypassing too, and we have to interrogate that gently and kindly.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Jonathan, I don't know if you have anything about this first question around how to begin to start conversations with people who are not familiar, especially maybe in service of becoming involved in the resistance in some way, or signing onto a pledge or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it'll be a lot of repeating what Carinne just said, because you have to meet people where they're at, ask compassionate questions, and start with shared values, and shared struggles. Because if it's someone who cares about almost any justice issue here in the US, you can find similarities with what is happening in Palestine. One of the chapters in Marian Kaba and Kelly Hayes' book, Let This Radicalize You, is ask a Palestinian, because they've probably gone through whatever you're going through, because Palestine is probably the most colonized place on earth from various different groups. So there's going to be shared connections with the struggles that any group of people is going through. And so I think there's a lot of commonality that you can help people understand.
Thank you. There's a few more. I think we have time for one more. This one feels important, and one that I'd hoped to get to earlier, so I'm happy to bring it in. How do you engage with fellow practitioners in an organization where there may be differing views, maybe some conflation happening with being pro-Palestine and being anti-Semitic? Part of this feels an education, part also feels about how we relate to our practices during divisive times.
I mean, to the anti-Semitism point, it's a big one. And I think that something we could consider collectively is thinking about, I think that in general, I just think know history, be precise is something I say in lots of trainings that I do around what is and isn't anti-Semitism. It really helps to also actually, if you're worried about your Palestine, the way you're dealing with Palestine and Israel getting into being anti-Semitic, well, the best way is to actually just learn, see for yourself, learn for yourself. And it's not complicated. It's complex, but it's not complicated, right? The moral issue is not complicated. History of colonialism, empires, genocides, refugees, that's complex, but that's part of our responsibility. But I say that because I think it could really behoove maybe BPF to lead, or other groups to lead on. We've done I've done training programs in which it's talking about Israel-Palestine, Palestinians talk about it, Jews and Jewish-Israelis talk about it, and then we talk about using anti-Semitism as sort of a wedge issue and how it gets politicized. So there could be an opportunity to actually, like, it's not like this, right? It doesn't just happen. That being said, you know, I will say, there has been a concerted effort. If you haven't seen Just Vision's film Boycott, watch it, maybe watch it as a sangha that just lays out very simply the strategy and the effort by the Israeli government and those who support it to go after the free speech of those who support Palestine. And that's happening around the world, not just in the US. And so, and the conflation there with anti-Semitism. So there are resources where you can see how it's happening. It is a strategy. And so I think the best thing folks can do is actually resist, like just retreating just because it's hard, using the practice to stay in place, and then looking for the resources that can actually help guide with the questions that you have. You do not need to answer all these questions on your own. There are people who've been doing this for a very long time, but you have the benefit of having the practice to stay in the room, even when it's really, really hard.
I'll speak like very practically for like communities where this is not obvious to everyone immediately. The tendency that we see is first, like, bring it up, see what happens. People might surprise you. And if you do, there tends to not be a complete like shutting off. Usually what people say is, well, we need more education, is like kind of the excuse to not do action. Take them up on that. There are you know, study guides that groups can come together. Maybe someone could make one that's specifically for Buddhists to look at. You know, we did this in the Mennonite church. We made a like something that connects to Mennonite values and talks about Palestine, and encourage your community to do education together to help you all get on the same page. And then maybe there's action, or maybe there's a speaker that you can all agree to come to get your community to be willing to have more conversation, to be kind of out there on this, that this is an issue that is welcome then at that point, and then you can start taking action. But those are just some of the strategies that I've seen be very successful within communities.
That's awesome. And I feel like, you know, one thing we do have going for us is like Buddhists is like curiosity, you know, and investigation being a part of our real practice. And certainly learning together, nerding out together, and finding, you know, discovering for ourselves, as you suggested, is an appealing invitation. Yeah, thank you so much. You have been so generous. I feel like I'm leaving with, you know, several ideas and seeds popping for what could be done here and elsewhere. And I'm sure that many of our audiences too. We didn't get to all the questions, but I've saved them and am going to, yeah, but it may be an opportunity for us to have like a write-in or a blog post. We'll see if we can incorporate them in some other way. Before we go, Carinne and Jonathan, I'm wondering if you might be willing to share one or two or three of your like most important things that you would love to see the folks here gathered today do right now in service of Palestinian liberation.
I'll start on this one, and I'll give one, then you can give one, and we can go one of no. I going off what I just said, I think bring this up with your community. I think that the Apartheid-Free Communities Pledge is a great tool to, like, it's a reason to bring it up in your community at this moment. So please use it for that. I also want to say it being part of being an apartheid-free community gives you access to a whole network of 170 religious communities that are finding various creative ways to live out that pledge. And so that's one of the reasons why we encourage communities to do it, because it will help you know about more ways that you can support Palestinian rights in this moment.
Yeah, do all those things, really do all those things. I really like rules of three, so I like the block build B, I like the Hillel's 3 questions. I learned from through mi gente, the Chilean, like desde contra sin, which is like from within power, from outside power, and without alternatives to the state, which is sort of like block build B. And so I think kind of like situating yourself within those places or trying something from each one. I think in the Hillel, or the 3 tenets, come bear witness to what's arising for yourself, so you show up correct in spaces, and interrogate also, where are the things that I'm thinking coming from? Those of us who've been here since 9/11, there's a lot of Islamophobia that's just like in the water, like intentionally in the water, like fluoride. I sound like a conspiracy theorist. There is a lot of intentional propaganda, right? Islamophobia. So interrogate also the areas of discomfort. Personally, I really think the sort of anything of the mutual aid, right? Like just be with each other is the most profound act possible. And then also, like try out a march that, Palestinian music is so fun. Like I just, the news and everything, and it looks loud and it looks scary, but Palestinians have had to believe in life over death, and so try it and invite someone, to go.
Yeah, thank you. I'm certainly looking forward to driving down to DC on November 4th.
See you there.
I'll see some of you there. Okay. We are gonna have to move towards closing, although I feel like I would love to stay up late with you all. Maybe not tonight, but another night soon. Thank you all for joining us. So my job now is to offer a offering from BPF and also a dedication of merit. But before I do, I really can't thank you all enough for joining us and for being able to. I also find myself in a space of being like, oh, I don't know enough. I'm like still in the process of building my learning, and it really meant a lot to be able to step into the space with you and know that that was okay, and that we could learn, that I could be also tired, learning, imperfect, and that we could do something good together tonight. Thank you all for joining. 2 things, the BPF this week will start doing something that we're kind of softly launching and calling refuge circles. They're an opportunity to come and practice at noon Eastern time each day, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we've invited different amazing engaged Buddhist teachers to lead 20 minutes of practice. It'll be followed by support for calling your representatives and learning about calls to action. So that's starting actually tomorrow. We haven't even put it on our website. It's not on social media. You're getting like the cool kids invitation tomorrow. If you come through, Jacoby Ballard, an amazing meditation teacher, yoga teacher, and one of our beloved board members will be there offering a trauma-informed practice, followed by making calls. So please show up for that if you're interested, if you feel called. And then just to quickly offer the merit of this practice, what I was taught is that when a group of people come together to work with their minds and hearts and to just be in the love of freedom together, and then wish not to harm one another, there's a tremendous field of goodness that gets created from that. And that in these moments of transitioning out of that space, we actually have the opportunity to extend that goodness far and wide. And so if you like, you can take a moment just to feel, if you feel inside your body and your heart and your mind, any goodness that has been generated here. And then connect with the wish that in some way our practice be of benefit to others, and that it prime us to show up for liberation wherever we can. Taking a deep breath. A big thank you and lots of love. If you are interested in joining our refuge circle tomorrow or anytime this week, you can check out the link in the chat, and hope to see you soon. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. The chat is open in case folks want to put in any thanks or any welcomes before we close for the next 30 seconds. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Beautiful to tune in with everybody here. We'll share out the recording of this as promptly as we can, and also send the link to the Refuge Circle. If you missed it, it's put it again, although there's a flood of chat going through, so you'll catch it if you can. Thanks, everybody. Hey, I didn't stop the chat. Stop this recording by now.